Hey, I'm Decathlon Gamer, and welcome to a Pro Cycling Manager 2020 complete guide to your planner. Now, this is relevant for older editions of PCM as well, with just two exceptions. I will not bring them up over and over again, but I'll try to bring it up at least once more when it becomes relevant later on. The two pieces are morale, which was only introduced this year, as well as the auto planner. Let's get that part out of the way. The auto planner is horrendous. It is so bad. It will fill it out for you. However, it will not manage your rider's fitness levels. It will not manage your rider's fatigue. It will not manage your rider's morale. None of those things will happen, and it certainly will not provide you with the best riders you need. It is a quick way to get through your calendar, through your year, but it is not useful. Also, this is going to be the complete guide, so this is the ultimate way to do this. I don't even use this as my regular method, at least not to the 100% extent. I do it to a lesser extent. Your planner is the worst, most boring 90 minutes you will spend preparing every season. It is dull. It's not fun, but it is the best 90 minutes you will make, because if done right, your planner will make or break your season. If you've seen any of my career mode series, that we use it to great extent to find success with a team that is not built to be very good. The game, of course, is broken up into three tiers. You have Continental, Continental Pro, and World Tour. The planner is relevant for all three levels. For this example, we're going to go ahead and use Team DSM of the World Tour. This is also the German team formerly known as Team Sunweb, using a mod here that updates the database to the 2021 real-life teams. A new year in real life obviously begins on January 1st. Well, it does in the game as well. However, your planner work is going to take place on January 2nd. January 1st, there's one key thing that needs to take place: preseason planning. Going into that tab, all of your riders, all of them, should be set to very high. In real life, you cannot maintain high fitness throughout the year. In this game, you can and always should. Once you have your entire roster set to very high, go ahead and confirm. This is not a tutorial on how to set up your objectives for the year. However, that is another task that is often completed on the 1st of January, but that's it. From here, you can move on to the 2nd of January and enter your planning phase. First things first, I want you to uncheck your monthly auto planning assistant. With only a single exception, this is not helpful. It is not useful. It is not good for you. It will not be effective in any way, shape, or form. Here is the one exception. Your sponsorship for the following year is signed on the last day of July. Your signing period for the following year begins on the 1st of August, and you can have your entire team signed within a couple days of the beginning of August. With a couple large races in August itself, by the time you hit September, there's almost nothing left on the calendar. By default, almost all the riders, their fitness begins to fade at that period. They just finish out those last few races, and that stuff all happens naturally. From September on, you're essentially done. I will often, in late August, check that box. Let it finish off the year for me. Save some time. This is the complete guide on how to get the most out of it. Always plan your best riders. Always plan your objectives, especially through the end of July. The only other difference between the three levels that's going to matter, that's going to be relevant, the oddball, is that it's the middle tier will often throw a wrench. You are a Continental Pro team. You will participate primarily in Continental and Continental Pro races. Your sponsor will automatically get you in some World Tour races. It could be a few, it could be a handful, it could be a little bit more if you're a major Continental Pro team. But the majority of the World Tour races will invite 3 or 4 Continental Pro teams to those races. And the majority of those slots are not filled at the beginning of the year. As a Continental Pro team, you're going to apply to those races. You're not going to hear back immediately. Because of that, it can completely change your planning for the season. So when I do Continental Pro, I do not plan the entire season at once. On January 2nd, I ask for an invite to every Continental Pro race that I feel I can participate in, that I can manage, but you don't get the response immediately. And as a result, when I do Continental Pro, I will often plan 1, 2, or 3 months at a time. But because Continental Pro is the only level that happens at for Continental and for World Tour, you can literally plan your entire season on January 2nd. Get it done, get it over with. You can manage your fitness levels, your morale for your riders, all of that taken care of in about 90 minutes of effort. And then you don't have to mess with it again, barring the one exception that is the impact of injuries. Beginning with PCM 20, morale became a feature of the game and an important thing to pay attention to. One of the easy ways to boost morale of your riders is to make sure that they are involved in their national races. Now, I don't normally go as far as this. However, if you were to take a spreadsheet and put all of your riders down on a list and then note what nation they are a part of, this is one of the things that I do normally pay attention to. However, I do it on a smaller scale and I don't normally actually go as far as recording this. However, if you have a large team, a large World Tour team, and especially if it's a new team and you're just starting with them, like this one, and you've got riders from all over the world, it's really hard to track this and go back and forth, checking over and over again. The easiest thing you can do, though it does take a little bit of time, is you can write down the names of all of your riders on the team. I'm using a spreadsheet to do this, and I'll show you that spreadsheet here shortly. But I've also noted what nation all of those riders are from. And if you can get your riders into all of their national races or some of their national races that you participate in, you are going to boost the morale of your riders. Your riders do care about participating in their home races. And so this is an easy way to help keep morale high on your team. Now, in another column beside that one of the important things to note is the popularity, aka the reputation of your riders. You do not need to know all of your riders, but you do need to know the 3, 4, or 5 most popular riders on your team. As you can see here, Mark Hershey has continental popularity, which is good. It actually could go much higher than that. So the easy way to check this is to just cycle through. So open up the profile for one of your riders and cycle through all the riders on your team at least once, and you'll see who your most popular riders are. Now, with a large team, you might have to cycle through 2 or 3 times to specifically identify and in what order your highest popular riders are, but it's important to know not just your single highest rider, but those 3 to 5. To see where and why popularity matters and to go into a little more detail on what you can do about it, under Manager, Sponsors, your team sponsor, so the second tab here, and then cycling over to Squad, you have a tab for your results, you have a tab for your registered riders, and a tab for your squad. These 3 evaluations combine into your sponsor confidence and are very, very important to that overall of your sponsor confidence. But in that squad evaluation, you have your most popular rider of all is noted here. So we have 2 stars. That's Nick Roche and Romain Bardet. Bardet is the most popular of those. So Roche is also a star, but a bit below that level. Now, here's what else is going to matter. We have a sponsor who cares about having riders from Belgium, which we do, and they're satisfied with the number we have, but none of those Belgian riders are well known. Actually, that's not entirely true. We have Tish Benoot, who has a national reputation. It's not high enough. They want him to have more than a national reputation. But let's say Tish Benoot ends up having a really good season for us. It's going to raise his reputation. And as a result, we could actually end up before the end of the season getting a boost here because he's close to being high enough. Outside of our senior man of Bardet and Nick Roche, who's Irish and not helping us with the sponsor other than the overall popularity part, that's going to be a little bit of an issue with this team to try to keep the sponsor happy. We'll come back into how to do that in another phase. Like I said, we're covering the perfect world scenario. This is that complete guide to how to maximize your planner. Now, in most circumstances, I go a step below this. I use sticky notes to jot down this information for this next part. And I do it every single season before I get into my planner, because this one saves a ton of time when you get into the planner itself. I go into the squad view and go to attributes. I choose 6 categories that are relevant to me. There are a couple of others. I'll point those out, but I will, for the purpose of this one, fill out the 6 that are relevant. First thing I do is I sort via mountain rating. There's 2 things that are going to be relevant when I look at this one. Obviously, the mountain rating itself. The best pure climbers come out of this one. You can also glance down here to resistance to see how long they're going to last. For example, Bardet might be a good climber, but he's got good resistance as well. Hindley is equally good as a climber as Bardet, but he does not last as long. He does not have the stamina. He does not have the resistance. He's going to fade out more quickly. So my top tier is Bardet and Hindley, and then I have a second tier. These are my support climbers. These are the ones that I want helping either Bardet or Hindley as a leader on a big climb. So you have Roche, you have Hershey, you have Benoot, you have Hamilton, Tusveld, Leknesund, Donovan Arnsman, and Van Wilder, and then finally Storer. Those all have 68 or more on resistance, which is at least serviceable. They have 72 or more on the climbing, 72 to 75. They're all in that similar range. Now, Chad Haga is not a good example, especially as far down the list as he is. He's a 70 mountain, so he's a couple points below everybody else. Also, he only has a 65 resistance. Piece those things together, and he will not stick around long. So we have a good number of support climbers that are similar to one another. Nick Roche is definitely a bit better than others. Mark Hershey is absolutely a bit better, as he's a 74 with 77 resistance. Tish Benoot, Chris Hamilton are pretty good. So you could almost put those guys as your second tier and then the others as a third tier if you wanted. And when you get to this many names, it's not a bad idea if you have a large team like this to have a first, second, and third tier even, so that you can manage it a little more easily when you get into the planner itself. My next category is for punchers. I'm going to follow the same format. Mark Hershey, top puncher. Bardet, Tish Benoot, Hindley, Roche, Soren Kragh Andersen are your best second options. Looking after the possibility of a third tier on this one, you got to look more into what else do they offer. Besides the hill rating, which is the obvious one for punchers, you need to have good acceleration, a chance to separate from other riders or finish things off. So for our third tier of riders, Chris Hamilton's okay. He's got a 74 hill. He's also got a 74 mountain, so he's not going to get dropped. And he's got okay acceleration at 72. But Casper Pedersen's pretty good. 74 hill, 75 acceleration, 72 sprint. He could possibly win an event. My next category is time trial. You could also split this down specifically to prologuers if you want to know who your best riders are in a prologue. However, I tend to look at both of these and combine it down to see who my best in the discipline are. So you can see Kragh Andersen is clearly the best overall within the team, and then there is a bit of a drop off from there, but you still have good options. If you have a team time trial, you want to have 4 or 5 good time trialists that are there. So this one always ends up a shorter list for me, but I don't often focus on time trial as one of my key components when I build a team, because I often build a team on a very small budget. My next category is cobbled classics. Now there's 3 basic types of classics. You have your cobbled classics, you have your punchy classics, and you have your just long distance sprint classics. I use my sprint category, my cobbled category, or my puncher category, as opposed to a lots and lots of stamina type rider for just a long flat stage. I still think it ultimately comes down to a sprint, and so I don't bother making an additional category for that type of race where you have your high stamina Barradour type riders. Now when it comes to cobbled classics, you're going to often need about 7 riders in a race. And so I want to have minimum 7 names that I'm at least recording for this. Who are the 7 best? If you go to a Paris-Roubaix with somebody who does not have a cobble rating, they're going to get dropped very, very early in that race. And so I like to have at least 7 names so that I know that I'm picking from the best riders that are going to be able to survive a race of that type. The more you have, the easier it is to diversify who's going to those races with those lower tiers. My next category is the sprint category. For this one, you obviously want to note who your best sprinters are, who can actually win some sprints. And for this team, it's simple because there's only one, and that's Case Bull. There's nobody else who's much of a sprinter on this team. From there, your second tier are your lead-out riders. Who's going to be the fastest one to give Case Bull a chance to get the win? So we've got Max Cantor. We've got Denise. Ikias Arndt is a bit iffy on that. Pedersen at least has a little more acceleration, so I'd rather have Pedersen in front of Arndt in terms of the pecking order, and same with Mark Hershey. To get a third tier, I don't automatically just go down to who's got that 70 sprint. Reason being, this third tier, for a pure flat stage to lead it out, I like to do a lengthy train from 12 or even 15 kilometers out with the whole team and go through them one by one, keeping us at the front until we begin the sprint with the last 3 riders or so. So I want my sprinter at the back of the train. I want a couple lead out riders ahead of them. So I've got 5 of those to choose from here. Once you get past that point though, flat rating is all that matters because they're not actually sprinting. They're just running at the front. The faster they are naturally, the longer they're going to be able to maintain that and put more pressure on those behind us to try to cover that gap that we've already established with our sprinter over, say, their sprinters. The next thing that matters for me, my third tier, is more about flat rating than sprint. So Soren Kragh Andersen is a fantastic early lead-out rider for us, the 4th man in the line, because he can go through a quick turn of pace, as can Tish Benoot. I have one category left that I'm going to get to in just a moment, but let me highlight a couple of the other potential categories that you could put in if you wanted to go this far. You could note who your best downhill riders are. That's one place where I've taken advantage many times and won a lot of stages. In career mode, I almost never use the breakaway. The Barrador rating by itself is only for AI. It means absolutely nothing to you. High stamina and flat rating are what is important for a good breakaway rider. So if you wanted to note who your breakaway riders would be, you could absolutely make a list of high flat and stamina combinations like Hershey, Benoot, Bardet. Bardet's not very high on that flat, so Kragh Andersen. If you wanted to break it down further, having mountain, having time trial already noted is enough for me, but maybe you want to specifically go after GC type riders, as in the riders that do have that combination of mountain and time trial. You can make that note as well as an additional category. For me, my final category is the absence of all of these, because when you build your planner, you're building it for your entire team, not just your top riders. However, you can get away with building it for just your top riders. Absolutely can. But in the complete guide, we're looking at how to build it for your entire roster. And with that, my last category is domestiques. Now, for those who don't know what a domestique is, if you're new to the game, the domestique is the servant, the teammate, the one who's going to help the other riders, the one that's going to go back and get water for you, the one that's always going to be in a support role and never be in a lead role. For me, I calculate this quite simply. If I've already noted their name in my Mountain, Puncher, Time Trial, Cobble Classic, or Sprint list, they don't go on the domestique list. If they have not made any of those lists, they're going to go on the domestique list. And I'm going to tier my domestiques into 2 tiers. First tier, high potential young riders, the ones that I want to make sure that they're going to stay happy so that I can help them as they develop. I want to get them more time. I care more about them. Lastly, the ones that are low potential that I'd rather just have off the team, but not making much of a fuss. They're the last ones that are going to get in to any race scenario. Isn't it wonderful when a plan comes together? Literally, the last 8 riders on my list, in terms of overall average, the 70s and below, those are the 8 that didn't make a list. All 8 of them. Everybody above them is on one of those lists. So those are my 8 domestiques. Now, to divide them up, for me, the simple part is that Asborn, Craig Anderson, is 28. Kambao is 29. They're not going to develop anymore. They're definitely going on that second tier. The others could potentially still develop quite a bit until I take a look at their profiles to see what their potential is. That's all you need to know about the riders, but now I need to know about the sponsor, because so much of this game is going to come down to finances on what you could do going forward season by season. It's not just about the current season, it's about the next season and the season after that and the season after that. With a team like DSM, we're actually locked in, unfortunately. 666,000 is where we are currently. If we have success or super success, we're going to have 666,666 per month. That is not a good example. I am used to working with very small budgets and always trying to work up, up, up. Now, realistically, come July 31st, I would be signing a new sponsor and leaving DSM behind because our estimation max seems to have already been reached. So much of what you do in a season is going to be based on those objectives, and so your planner should be there accordingly. These 3, pretty important. I would make sure that at Eschborn Frankfurt, which is a sprint race, I would have my best sprinters. Case Bowl would absolutely be at this race. And Max Cantor and Mark Hershey and Casper Pedersen and Nikias Arndt, all the best lead-out riders, you better believe they're all going to this home race. The reason why this one matters so much to this sponsor is it is the big World Tour German race. Amstel Gold, same thing. I want to make sure that I have a top team for that one. Euroeyes, that's the other big German race. I want to make sure that I have my best riders for those. But after that, I actually wouldn't worry about it with this team. But any other scenario where you still have a chance to increase, then you absolutely want to go for that, because more money means better riders. And coming from somebody who has started with nothing in the finances department, I know how difficult it is to deal with the finances and being able to sign riders, especially when you get up to the higher end where a single rider can easily ask for 6 figures and go up over 100,000. So your target should be super success. And in order to get super success, you have to pay attention to objectives. To know what you need, go to the sponsors tab and your current sponsor. And then that first category here is objectives. And this is going to initially lay it out. This is going to lay it out over the calendar by date. First thing to know, anything after, and that's concluding after July 31st, does not matter. These last 3 objectives, a stage win at La Vuelta, the Euroeyes Classics of Hamburg, and the Deutschland Tour, those 3 objectives are meaningless. The reason being, the moment you sign July 31st with your sponsor for next year, whether you stay with the one you have or whether you are moving on to a new sponsor, it does not matter. Once you hit that point, it's done. It's set, and they do not impact where you start next year. So what we have here for a complete list of objectives this season for this team are these 9 dates. We have individual time trial and road championships for Australia. Not much I can do about those, not much I can impact. We have whatever riders we have, and we go for those dates. But then we have Santos Tour Down Under, Cadel Evans Great Ocean Road Race, Ronde van Vlaanderen, Amstel Gold, Eschborn Frankfurt. See, these are major ones for us. That's going to be really important. Everything before that is 2 stars or less. And then 4 straight national championship objectives. That's not normal. That's not what I'm used to seeing. And then stage win at the Tour de France. We really only have a handful of key dates to actually pay attention to. The rest are going to kind of happen organically. But what I'm going to do for these other 6 to break these down, we need to know a little bit of information about each of these 6 events. 2 key components that we need to know. The 2 pieces of information you need to know for each sponsor objective is, what is the objective? Now, for me, it doesn't necessarily matter when it comes to planning the difference between a top 3, top 5, or a top 10. What matters to me is whether it's a high finish overall versus winning a stage. Because in a stage race, there's a huge difference between going out and trying to earn a stage victory versus trying to finish in the top 3 or top 5 in the overall. It drastically changes how you plan for that race. Then the second piece of information you need to know is, what type of riders do you need to complete that objective? So you need to know the profile of the race. So the Santos Tour Down Under is a good example. We need a top 3 in the overall, not a stage victory. Look at the profile here. They have Wollonga, but it's seen as sprint. I need to see this. You have flat. You have flat again. You have a punchy stage, and you could definitely win that with punchers, but it's not that hard to get there. You want a combination of a puncher / sprinter for a stage like that. Stage 4 is here. Okay, we are hitting Wollonga Hill, but we're not finishing on top of Wollonga Hill this year. Oh my goodness, they've changed it. That's the finish line. Not this year. They're finishing down here. Okay, and then a sprint here. So that changes it. Seeing how that profile has changed would change the team that I'm bringing to it, because finishing on top of Wollonga Hill comes down to the sprinters being left behind and losing time. And if you need a top 3 overall, you need somebody who's going to get to the top first. But because you finish 30-something kilometers later on the flat, that opens it up to a bunch sprint, changing the outlook. And that one punchy stage that you have on there on stage 3 isn't that bad. And a lot of sprinters will make it to the finish on that one, meaning time bonuses. If you win 2 or 3 stages in a sprint, you could still win the overall of this version of the Santos Tour Down Under. So knowing that will determine what type of riders you bring to the race. So knowing the objective and what type of race it is incredibly important. Metaphorically, we haven't even begun to put pen to paper when it comes to the planner. We have nothing assigned as of yet. So that feels like a terrible start. We've done so much and yet we've gained so little. But what we've done is prepare ourselves for what's to come. And you're going to see that now, with that information, our planner preparation is going to go so much faster, so much smoother. It's going to be a lot easier as we go from here. First thing, when it comes to national championships, I don't bother filling them in. When the national championships come up and we have eligible riders, it's going to automatically populate them into that. So I don't worry. My Australian national championship guys will automatically show up on that list. The only time I do worry about that is if we have national championships and other scheduled races at the same time. So you can see we have our national championships here. There's no other races. We have our national time trials here. No other races during that week. Since that's it, we don't have another race going on, I don't need to bother with it. What I begin with is the objectives. Those make or break your money going forward. And like I said, the money is huge in this game, especially if you do what I do and start with a small budget. Start with a continental team and you're trying to just claw your way up the ladder. So our first manageable sponsor objective is that Santos Tour Down Under, the one we were just looking at, where that Wollonga Hill is not finishing in its normal place this year, and therefore it's down the road a little bit further. With that in mind, I'm thinking more of a sprint team, but we still need that punchy element, especially on stage 3. We're going to need a little bit of climbing support there on stage 5 to make sure that we get to the finish and can partake in that sprint. I'm going to look for a combination of riders, and I definitely want to bring my best to it because we want to start on the front foot with the sponsor confidence at this point in time. So our top sprinter is Case Bull. So briefly looking at Case Bull again, He's only a 62 mountain, 62 hill. He's going to struggle in those two places and may not be at his best for stages 3 or 5. He's going to need some support for sure. Who is our punchiest rider? Because obviously stage 3, we need the punchy part. We might gain something from that. That might at least help us secure a high position overall. Well, our top guy for that is Mark Hershey. And I know this because on my other screen, I'm looking at the spreadsheet that we made. And of course, if you don't have two screens, you can just print it out. Or you could do what I did, and that is use sticky notes or just piece of paper to jot all this information down there, having that information on hand instead of having to go rider by rider by rider by rider every single time you want to assign a single race. Not worth it. Not worth it at all. So Hershey absolutely getting in. Now you can see that Hershey is semi-capable as a sprinter, so he could definitely maybe get a win on stage 3, or at least get a podium on stage 3 and gain some time. If we can't get Case Bull to the top of stage 3, then we have to turn our attention to Mark Hershey or whoever did make it to that top once they fall away. So my goal would be, if I were managing this race, if we were actually participating in this race, stages 1 and 2, it's all about your sprinter. It's all about Case Bull. Stage 3, it's all about Mark Hershey, with Case Bull getting a free ride right behind, and hope that Case Bull gets same time. If Case Bull gets same time, then stages 3, 4, 5, 6 to the end of the tour, then it's still all about Case Bull and maintaining that position and hoping that he can get podiums on multiple stages and earn enough time to get top 3 overall. But if he falls away, then your attention changes to whoever still has that top time. Mark Hershey presumably would be. Maybe there's others. So who can we get to go with these guys to support them? Well, there's one more thing that's really important about this race before we go and assign somebody else. Those are your most capable guys to get a result. And obviously we need to get a result, and it's a difficult one because we need a top 3. But the other thing is we need to make our sponsor happy, not just with a result, but with the team that we brought to the race. So we need popular riders. We really only have 2 big choices. Hershey's kind of popular, but we have Bardet and we have Roche. Well, looking at those two, Bardet is a climber, but he's also pretty punchy. He could absolutely do well on that 3rd stage and is popular and is our most popular rider. So now we have the popularity part taken care of. We've got a couple punchers, so we can handle that part. You could just about get away with nothing but sprinters the rest of the way. Case Bull makes it through stage 3 on same time. Stage 5, I'd have Bardet protecting him and helping him get over the top of Wollonga Hill twice and still be in contention for the sprint to stay in contention for the overall. Now, the next thing is we want to, and we don't always have to do it on objectives. I'll often do it on other races. But when you can, it's important to try to get riders of a nationality to boost their morale into the races that are going to make them happy. In this case, one of our top riders, Jay Hindley, is Australian. Has a 79 mountain, has 75 hills, so he can support as a puncher. He's got good acceleration as well, good resistance, but absolutely could actually take over instead of Bardet as a support climber for Case Bull and or Mark Hershey. So now we've got 4 riders, 3 more slots. Do have a couple of additional Australian riders who would certainly be happy to be involved in an Australian race. Torquay, here's the easy one for this. Unimportant race. First thing I'm going to do in an unimportant race like this one is take all of the national riders. So now we have Hindley. So we have 3 Australian riders in Storr, Hamilton, and Hindley. Storr is slightly punchy. Hamilton certainly is an okay option there and could give us one more to handle the punchiness, and then it would certainly make him happy to be there. I'm going to go ahead and pass on Storr for Tour Down Under. I'll try to give him maybe Cadell Evans Great Ocean Road Race, but at least with Hamilton, we've got some good support for those 2 stages where he's needed. But then I need nothing but sprinters other than that, because right now we only have our 1 pure sprinter. He needs some lead-out riders. At this point, Hershey could certainly serve as a lead-out rider. He's got great acceleration and decent enough speed, but I need one more, and Max Cantor is our top. So we're going to bring in Cantor And then that's how you do it. You go for the objective that you need. What are the riders that are going to support that? You go for on an objective, only on objectives, not on other races. You go for getting the most popular or one of the most popular riders if you don't want to use that most popular rider on that occasion, especially if you have quality choices. For us, we really just have two choices right now. Hershey, not quite there with continental popularity. Bardet, Roche are. So those two are easy to choose from, easy to pick from. Either one works. Then win and where you can, not always with the objectives, but especially for other races like this one, getting the national riders in. That is such an easy choice. Now our next race is a little easier to do. We have Cadel Evans, Great Ocean Road Race. It's only 1 star. It's simple. It's Australian again, and it's a sprint. So what do we have for sprint teams? Well, we have the two popular guys. We have Bardet that we need to bring in, or we have Roche. Roche has a 73 flat, so he could be involved in early lead out. He could serve as a domestique for us, or 71 for Bardet. Neither one of them is actually going to help in a sprint. So what I'm going to do for this one is we're going to bring in Roche, and then of course our sprint team, so Case Bull. Hershey is certainly a quality option there, so we'll bring him in for that one. And then we got to look at our Australian contingencies and see which ones we want to bring in. Do I want to bring in Hindley? We need only a top 5 for this one. That's not going to be that hard to pull off. So we probably should just go ahead and try to make our Australian riders happy. And that means Hamilton and Storer. That's 6 of 7. So we have one more slot for a lead out rider. And we'll bring Cantor again. Now, here's the difficult part, is there's 2 other races that day. So in managing that specific day, here's how I would do this one. I need French riders. Do I have any French riders? Well, I have Bardet. Bardet's going to be happy to partake in a French race. Here's a day to make the guy we don't care about, to make him a little bit happy. Kambao, he's a French rider. Giving him a French race is going to help keep his morale from being an issue. And as there are no Spanish riders on this team, the way I would fill out these other 2 is I'm going to go with domestiques first and foremost to give them time. Leaders, I don't want them to participate in too many extra races. And so we'll really fill this in primarily on a date like this with less important riders. One other thing to keep an eye on is you can see how with 5 of 7 selected, it's in the red. If I add a 6th rider, it's now in white. Even though I only have 6 out of 7, I don't have to assign 7. I can get away with having just 6 riders at a race. And if you have a busy schedule, that's one way to save some legs. So after all of our domestiques, you can see I'm going to have to at least pick on a few of our better riders. So I'm going to start from the bottom, especially early in the season like this. And you can see just how big this team is because there's still a lot of riders who aren't riding that day with 3. This is a big team. This is twice the size of what I'm used to working with in terms of riders. Again, like I said, I play with a budget. Each of these light gray lines represents a week. The darker gray, and it's only slightly brighter or more pronounced than the other ones. These are the turn of the month. So you can see we have the 29th of January. So that's 1st of February. We have another one here where we have 1st of March. But what we have is we have 9 weeks across the screen. Now, depending on your screen resolution, that may be different. You might not have 9 weeks present. But for me, that means I have 2 months shown. When I scroll up and down here, what this is showing is the races that are present on that part of the calendar. I'll tend to work in chunks. I always begin with objectives first, and let's assume I filled in all the other objectives by this point. We have officially done 2 of those. Plus, we do have a couple national championship ones, but like I said, those will fill in naturally on their own. The blue races are your World Tour races. Those are always going to be the next most important thing to fill out. So before I bother with anything like the Tour of Oman or Andalusia, I'm going to worry about the UAE Tour. Even though it's not an objective, I'd still rather get a result there where it's worth a lot more points and a lot more prestige for my riders than if we get some sort of success at Andalusia. A third place here means more than a win here. Likewise, we also have Omloop Het Nieuwsblad that's going to happen at the same time. And so we've got to start managing 2 important races simultaneously and then a third irrelevant race. That is a French race. Now, I can tell you right now that Kambao, no problem. We can put him on that one, and actually the next day, no problem, easy fill-in. In fact, what I tend to do is I see French races, I pick French riders, and then his entire calendar is going to be racing domestique races in France, except he's not getting picked for Paris-Nice. Sorry, too big of a race, too small of a rider. This is an easy way to start filling out your calendar, is filling out the national ones. Take an Italian rider. I know we have one, Denise. Put him on the Italian races. Easy does it. You're going to start filling in a lot of gaps that way, simply by matching riders with their national races. The only place I make that exception is a big race or a big objective. Kambao is just not good enough. But if I can make him happy by putting him in all these other unimportant national races, he's going to be pretty happy at the end of the day for getting to participate in the majority of those. Now, I have no riders from the UAE, so that's going to be easy on how that determines my selection. But also, Omloop Het Nieuwsblad is a completely different profile. It's a sprint race, but it has cobbled sections. So it's a cobbled classic. I'm going to bring my top cobbled guys to that one, and then that's going to eliminate them from selection, which is going to make it a little easier for me to determine who I bring to the UAE Tour. Omloop Het Nieuwsblad as a Belgian race, and you can see that there's 2 more in the following days. I went ahead and took a look at my list of Belgian riders. Turns out I actually only have a couple. Van Wilder is another one. 68 cobble ratings, not great. He would absolutely be a domestique, but as it's not a sponsor objective, it's not that harsh. It's not that bad, and there's not that many cobbled sections. He'll have to serve as a domestique, but he's going to be really excited and really happy to be invited to partake in that race. So our other selection is the UAE Tour. You can see it's a combination of sprint and punchy stages. That's pretty hefty on the climb on stage 3. Again, on stage 5, it's almost down to a puncher, but it's going to come largely down to a combination, somebody who's a little bit of both. So Hershey, being at Het Nieuwsblad, he's a little bit of both. And maybe you want to bring him there instead. Bardet is somebody who's a good selection, as he absolutely is both. Hindley, he's more of a climber, but he can certainly help on those 2 stages, so we'll bring him along. There is some sprinting to do there, multiple sprint stages. So Case Bull could be an okay selection, but he's not going to do well on those punchy stages, so he wouldn't be involved in the overall. So he's somebody to think about for the sprint. With a 72 cobble rating, I could maybe bring him to Omloop Het Nieuwsblad, where he might, if he can be supported, make it to the end and be involved in the sprint and get a high finish. So Hershey, even though I picked him for Omloop Het Nieuwsblad, reevaluating here, he is very punchy, can climb relatively well, isn't that great on the cobbles anyway, so he's not going to be a contender there. So I'm going to go ahead and switch this up, and I'm going to use Case Bull instead, and then send Mark Hershey to the UAE Tour. Roche is a good combo guy. Craig Anderson is, but he's already used up for Omloop Het Nieuwsblad, as is Tish Benoot. Once you've managed your objectives and managed your big races, now you're getting down to the scraps. And when it comes down to the scraps, there's a couple key things to really pay attention to. One, morale boosters, like having your Belgian racers in your Belgian races, or having your French racers in your French races. Giving them all of those opportunities are going to maintain a high morale. From there, there's 2 more key things that are going to determine who goes into what races. 1, the balance of their fitness, and 2, the balance of their fatigue. To pay attention to those 2 things, there's two main parts to pay attention to. When it comes to managing those two things, there's two factors to look at. One, the number of days that they've raced, and two, creating a balanced schedule. In the first one, in these early days, you can see we already have 15 days worth of riding, 14 to 15 days for Hershey, Bardet, and Hindley. That's already quite a bit. You can see Soren Kragh Andersen at this point only has a single day that he's scheduled for. Now, if his first day of racing for the year is not until the end of February, he's going to already have low morale by the time he gets there for not being invited to a race, especially if you go 60 days. If you go 60 days without a race, they get very upset. But even after about 45 days, they start getting pretty upset. So you want to maintain a balanced schedule, make sure that they're racing occasionally, and then especially make sure that they're not racing too frequently where they're going to become overly fatigued. At this point, I'd start filling in races earlier in the year, like this Tropical, for some of the racers that don't have anything till later on and that we want to get in. This, you could see, is a good opportunity for some sprinters to get some days in, because a lot of the sprint races are classics or only a couple stages in a larger stage race. And yes, there's some of those that are prestigious and they want to go to, but often won't get invited to because you're bringing your Grand Tour guys or your stage racer types unless you are built as a sprint team, and then going for green jerseys at the Tour de France, etc. So this Tropical, great opportunity to get some of your lesser sprinters, because Case Bowl might be pretty busy in some more prestigious races. So getting Max Canter, well, okay, he's already assigned. He's busy. What about Denise and Hershey and Pedersen? Pedersen's available. Arndt is available. Case Bowl is not. So our other sprinters aren't there. So now we can maybe get into our third tier guys and give them some racing. Now the thing about a race like this, I'll never participate. I'm going to quick sim all 7 of those stages each and every year. It's never a bother unless it comes in as a sponsor objective. If the sponsor objective is to win a stage, easy. Go in, win the first stage, or fail that one and go in and win the second stage, and then just quick sim the rest. I've got 5 of 7 slots filled for that Tropical. Why don't I go ahead and then make sure that somebody a little further down is getting the rest of that time. And we have a couple domestiques we wanted to get time. That's for Mark and Brenner primarily. So I'll let them get those days in. You can see at this point, Jascha Soderlund has nothing until February. So these upcoming Spanish races, I'm going to go ahead and just throw him in, regardless of what type of race they are, to get him some days in the saddle. You can see Arnsman is in that same boat, and so I'll use him to fill in those 3 days as well. And this is how we ultimately create a balanced schedule. My better riders, my top guys, the ones that are in that first tier, Bardet, Hindley for the mountains, Hershey for the punchy races, Soren Kragh Andersen for the time trials, Tish Benoot, Soren Kragh Andersen for Cobble Classics, Case Bowl in the sprints. Those guys, I'm going to very rarely assign them to this type of race. Why? Because they're going to end up with a busy calendar in the races that matter. That's going to take up enough days. Now, the only reason why I would assign them somewhere else is if I have a large gap. This, 2 weeks, that's not a large gap. A month and a half, that's a large gap. I don't want riders going more than about 3 to 4 weeks without a race. And so I'll fill in random single classics for a rider to help manage their calendar and keep them in the saddle at least occasionally. You can see Chad Haga still doesn't have anything filled in. Of course, I still have a bunch of days to go. He would then be that next guy that I use to fill out a few random days. That's how you build the calendar. Now, once the whole calendar is filled out, and I'm going to assume that this bottom end of the roster is going to fill out all of these days. Let's assume that Dens doesn't even have any days yet. I missed that. Let's assume at least from Soderlund on up, that is their calendar to start the year. No additional days would be assigned to them, other than our Australian guys, Hindley, going to the Australian National Championships. That's 2 days. It's not going to impact things much. So what I do from here is I will open up every single player All right, every single rider on the team. Now, as I haven't filled out the entire calendar, I'm not going to do the bottom tier, but I open up all of this tab right here, which is their training program. Again, assuming Mark Hershey is only going to participate in these 3 races to open the year, I'm now going to manage his fitness. Now, 2 things to pay attention to. The most important is the red line. You can see here at the end of this, 52 points. Anything over 50 triggers a penalty for fatigue. We don't want to ever see that red line emerge. This is bad. We're going to make that go away. The second thing is you want this as high as you can manage to keep it. And I only train in one of 2 ways. I train either max or not at all, with very rare exceptions where I mix it up a little bit with a single or double plus. Now, there's your 4 tiers. So 0 is no training, light training, moderate training, or heavy training. I do one or the other. Now, the first week's always locked in. Unfortunately, it is what it is. You can't do anything about that. Early on, we need to build some fitness. We started with very high. There's a reason for it, because you want to be ready for the beginning of the year. So triple plus, triple plus, triple plus. That's our training. That's going to bring his fitness up. Now, we need to start fitting in breaks. If you're only racing 1 day, no problem. 6 days off in a week is a good thing. Racing 1 day does not hurt you. You could see his workload was 14%. That's not bad. That's not bad at all. He's still got high fitness. That's good. Still high fitness. I don't want a 1-star here. That's not good. We're going to go for a 3-star there and a break here. That's 2 days of racing. That's where I kind of draw the limit. I'm looking for 5 days off in a week if I'm going to take an off week. I will settle for 4. I'll settle for 2 on rare occasions just to make things work on a busy calendar. You take what you can get. However, in general, I'm looking for 5 days off in a week or more. And for any period, you can see here I'm showing 9 weeks. For any period, I'm looking for 2 to 3 rest weeks. But you don't want them back to back. When you go back to back, see how the fitness drops off real fast? If you go back to back to back, look how it plummets. Not good. So they've got to be spread out. You want generally 3 weeks in between. Unless you only had a couple days off, then they're going to have to be more frequent, but then that's going to hurt your fitness level, your prep. So to manage the fitness, once the calendar is built, there's only 2 factors that are going to go into their fitness and their fatigue at this point in time. Those 2 factors are their schedule, and that's why it's important to fill out the schedule first before you do fitness, and then their training. If you add in training camps do not impact fatigue or fitness levels at all. They have 0 impact on it. The only type of training camps you need, you can do the time trial ones because they do offer you a bonus, but the reconnoitering, those are the good ones. Those are the useful ones for the Grand Tours, especially if you're targeting a high overall finish or maybe getting a stage victory on a certain stage with a puncher like Mark Hershey. But this is how I build the program. You can see now, no fitness. He's only got 20 points of tiredness at the end of this period here. Even the week before, it's just 32 points. And yet, by the end of this, he's sitting at 99% fitness. You can manage the entire year like this. It's a little harder as the year goes on to manage it, but you can literally, on January 2nd, plan out your entire year, have their fitness programs, their training, all of it done. Bardet, you can see this one's a little more complicated at this point. Now, in terms of the schedule, it's easy because he's only doing 3 days. But managing this, we got to get this right. We could rest on this day. You can see it doesn't hurt him, but it only gives him, 4 days off that week? So he goes from 31 points of fatigue down to 23. So he's only recovering 8 points. It's not a lot. So I'd prefer to keep him going 1 week longer if possible and then give him the rest here, because now we're looking at 24 instead of what it would have been. And that's a little bit later on. So he's back to building. You can see at the end of this week, it's 45. It's almost there, but it's not quite. Give him a rest here, back down to 34. Never hits that point. It always calculates at the end of the week, and the impact is for the following week. So if you end a week with more than 50%, sorry, you're in trouble. If you have a major race and you keep the training up to keep the fitness high for that race, and then you end up with fatigue the week following, well, for one thing, you can try to take that week off and get your recovery there. But if you do end up with fatigue because you raced like 5 days that week, it's not going to impact those last 5 days of that race. What it will impact is the following week. If you have no races the following week and you could rest that week and recover, it's never going to impact you. So it's actually okay. It's complicated, but it's okay. Now what I do is I'll open all of them initially because it gets really wonky when it's expanding and shrinking. And as I finish each one, I close it and then move on to my next rider. You can see this one may be a little harder to manage, but there's only 1 day racing there. It's not too bad. Now let's take somebody, let's just randomly add in a little bit more. Let's make this a busier rider. So you can see by the end of this period, Soren Kragh Andersen is relatively fatigued. 63 points of fatigue by the end of this, and a stretch where he is quite busy. So to manage a busy schedule, key things is to look for opportunities to get rest. We have some opportunities here early on, but if we go too low right now, that's going to have a bad impact. So we don't want to do that there. We want to take that full week of practice. But if we take a 0 here, we're getting 5 days off before we start our busy schedule. And you can see we've already eliminated all the fatigue that there was. It does lower our fitness a little bit, but 91% is not that bad. It's not a big race at the start of that stretch, so it's okay. Now we can also get into some of this regular training. Also, we've got to try to squeeze in a break somewhere. If we do it here, by the end of the period, we're looking at just 21 points of fatigue. And that fitness level is now at 100%. So that works. That works. Another option you could maybe have if there is a little more fatigue is you could squeeze a break in somewhere like back here. By the end of this, we're looking at 97% fitness at just 4 points of fatigue. That's actually pretty dang good because that's going to have a bigger, longer term impact on how his season shapes up in the later weeks. But that's how you do it, folks. Fill out the planner first. Then go in and manage your fitness on your riders. Make sure there is no red bar and keep that green bar as high as you can throughout the season, for the entirety of the season. And it's that simple. Just a reminder of a few tips, a little summary. Start with your objectives. Make sure you include your most prestigious riders. Boost their morale. In PCM 20 and PCM 19, you don't need to worry about it, but boost their morale by making sure they get into as many of their national races as you can get them into. And then to make life easier on yourself before you go into the planner. Take a little time, even if it's just a sticky note. Go through category by category, race type by race type. Get your highest best riders, get their names jotted down. And then also with your objectives, know what type of objective and what type of race those objectives are. Get those key things out of the way, and the planning phase is going to go so much faster than it would be if you take it one race at a time and break it down that way. It's going to take you forever. But there you have it, folks. That's your complete guide to the planner in Pro Cycling Manager. Make sure that you maximize those objective opportunities so you get paid and manage that fitness well. Focus on those objectives, especially the popular rider. Prioritize rider strengths anywhere you can. Prioritize morale anywhere you can. Keep a balanced schedule. Limit the number of days they participate in. It's hard to say for sure, but 75 to 80 days is pretty manageable over the course of a season. You could push it up to about 100 and deal with some fatigue. Anything more than that, they're done. I think you can get away a little more with maybe 80, 85, but not necessarily 100. So manage their days. Make sure they get enough of them. Even those domestiques still need some days to keep happy. Finally, a few bonus tips. Pay attention to injuries. When injuries happen, it's going to change the landscape. You can see how long a rider is out. You can see what day they're going to return. Any races they were scheduled to participate in are often going to need a replacement, or you're going to want a replacement, especially for a major race, or if it puts you below the minimum number of riders. Those replacements are now going to have a heavier workload. You might have to go in and reassess their fitness programs. Also, Continental Pro, you're going to have that impact of what races you end up getting into World Tour wise and which ones you don't get into, changing your schedule as the season goes on. So for Continental Pro, I don't plan an entire season at one point. I will often do 1 to 2 months at a time to just stay ahead of it, as your schedule is subject to change. One important thing, when you have a major race coming up, you need to leave some gaps. If Bardet is going to the Giro d'Italia, I am not going to send Bardet to the Tour de Romandie. I'm not going to send him to Liège-Bastogne-Liège, Castilla-Leon, Eschborn-Frankfurt, Tour de Yorkshire. He is not going to any of these races prior to the Giro d'Italia. Okay? By freeing up 2 weeks, roughly, before the race, a couple things are going to happen. One, he's going to get his rest day in. He's going to rest that week before, and he's going to have 7 days off. He's not going to suffer fatigue at the end of those 21 stages. 2, it gives me a space to put in a training camp where he can go and reconnoiter some of the major stages, say stage 18 and 19 and 20. He can go recon those 3 stages and get a bonus for those stages and be that much more effective and that much better than the other team's riders at the end of that tour. It'll help you manage their fitness. It'll give you space to put in fitness camps, which doesn't impact their fitness. And one final tip, when you go to your squad evaluation, there's a couple things that are going to matter. It's the popular rider, right? Your most popular is Bardet. Okay, get him some results. His popularity goes up. Your sponsor is going to be even more happy with him. But you also have your secondary ones. They care about a Belgian rider. They care about a Dutch rider. They care about a German rider and a Danish rider and an Australian rider. And none of them have the level of popularity that's going to make this sponsor very happy. When and where you can, find a way to take those riders, know which one is the most popular on your team from that nation, and try to get them some results. If you can get them some results, you get them a few wins, you're going to boost their popularity, and then you're going to boost your evaluation of your sponsor based on that nation. I'm Decathlon Gamer. Thanks for tuning in. I know this was a long one, but as boring as the planner is, it is the most effective use of your time in this game. It is going to have the biggest impact on the outcome. If you liked what you saw here, be sure to hit that like button if you want to see more. Also hit subscribe, and I have plenty of other tutorials and more coming soon after this one. Thanks for tuning in. Have a wonderful week, everybody. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.